All right. If everyone is all set, we're going to get rolling. And that microphone is very loud. Just to clarify, so we are going to be recording these meetings. Tonight, it is being just recorded. We have a new YouTube channel set up that will be covering these meetings. As of next week, we're figuring out that stack back there so we can broadcast both to a school committee channel as well as the school building committee channel, and I think Dylan has figured that out. But for tonight, we're going to record this, and then it will be posted onto the separate YouTube stream for the school, explicitly for the school building committee. So I am going to get us rolling. Part of what we're going to do here tonight is organize and choose a chair. But to start off by saying welcome, for those of you who have been part of Triton for a while, you know that this is a very long time in coming. We have been working towards a renovation project for many years. We have yet to determine, obviously, what that will be. But to start off, we can talk about like whether we use Robert's rules. So we're basically following open meeting law. I think this can have a little less formal structure than a typical board. But these are publicly posted meetings. You'll find them on it's called Board Docs on our main website. So just like any other school committee meeting, we'll post these 48 hours in advance. Minutes will be produced. We'll have those minutes posted online after the meeting. So why don't we start? Did I actually say on camera that this is the Triton Regional School Building Committee for the middle school, high school project. So I was going to go around and do introductions, but I guess for the sake of those watching at home, just to talk through the process of how we ended up here tonight with the 18 of you. So as part of the MSBA process that we'll spend a little bit of time talking through tonight, just to make sure everyone's clear on the timing, we have to establish a school building committee. Included in your packet is it's actually on the second full page, two-sided, is a Q&A. This school building committee, or SBC, is required by law if we are partnering with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which we thankfully are. And so this body will be making decisions throughout the next 5 to 7 years as we go through this process to make determinations about the building, the design, the budget, and ultimately it is then approved by the school committee, of which we have 2 members on the building committee, before it is then put to the town voters. Obviously, we assume any project here is going to require a debt exclusion override. So this body is an oversight process, a body that will have oversight on this project throughout the entirety. This group will not be required to be always boots on the ground in the trailer on a weekly basis with designers, and when we get to that point, and architects and contractors. But this is the high level. Any decisions are coming back to this group, and we can talk through a process about what we'd like to do as far as setting a schedule, timing, and so forth as we go. So there is a roster that was posted, but why don't we just, all but Allison Irvin, who is the middle school teacher rep, who left this morning with a bunch of 8th graders to head down to DC, so she wasn't able to make this meeting tonight. But why don't we just go around the table and introduce ourselves. I didn't say this either. My name is Brian Forget. I'm the superintendent here at Triton Regional. And why don't I first make an introduction to my right. Rich Poor is not yet the Director of Finance and Operations. He was appointed by the school committee last month, I believe. Officially, he starts on July 1st. Obviously, there's not a lot of work that's going to be happening before July 1st, other than a lot of paper exercise and work that we're doing internally to get information to the department, to the MSBA. But Rich will be here. Obviously, a lot of time after July 1, and until then, he's going to start getting involved in this process and in other aspects of the district. So you can say something yourself as well, but I wanted to make sure I introduced you as well.
I think you hit it. You're
That's
good.
it. All right. So why don't we keep going around the horn that way? And if I can just say, when you're speaking, if you hit the button on the mic, it will turn green, and then you're live. And when you're done speaking, hit it, and so it turns red.
All right, I'm live. John Skonecki, Facilities and Grounds Manager.
Mike Colburn, Salisbury Selectman.
Matt Leonard, School Committee.
Christine Nealon, Chair, Raleigh Board of Selectmen.
Alicia Greco, Chair, Newbury Select Board.
Narissa Wallen, School Committee.
Peter Abram, father of a middle school student.
River Wynn, high school junior.
Patrick Jansen, high school sophomore.
Matt Haley, high school teacher.
Patrick Kelly, Triton High School principal.
Alan McRae, middle school principal.
Peter Secondiani, community rep.
Erica Champagne, high school parent.
Jim Kolb, community rep.
So the folks around the table represent all of our constituents, right? As the school committee was determining the makeup of this group, we felt it was important that we had a voice at the table from all of those folks who need to have a voice. So we have student representatives, we have educators, we obviously have the principals, we have school committee members, we have a member from each of the select boards in our towns, obviously district administration, and then a parent from each school, and then Peter and Jim are the requirement through the Department of Ed, through MSBA is community representatives that have industry experience. So Peter comes with construction industry experience. As the next step in this process, we are going to be selecting an owner's project manager. And so Jim actually, in his days, spends time with STV as an OPM. So a great asset for us to have an OPM that we will hire, but also an OPM with experience who's truly working with us as a board on behalf of the district. So thank you all for your time and commitment to make sure that you are clear. I tried to make this clear through emails that this is not a 6 months and you're done sentence. This is a 5 to 7 year process. Generally speaking, we'll go through the timelines, but it ranges depending on what we need to study and what the next steps will bring. But it is a long-term commitment. That doesn't mean that we can't change. And as people, if people need to move on, obviously we can shift. But as I had shared initially, the hope was for individuals who are looking to commit to this project and have a voice. And so one of the things we need to do is talk about a schedule. I don't know if we have to set a firm schedule tonight. I think early on in the process, the idea is tonight to have a kind of a gathering, talk through the process, what to expect, and then we can set schedules as we move forward. I don't think we need to make that determination tonight because I also am not fully sure exactly when we need to start meeting routinely. So that will be determined in the months ahead. So the first thing we need to do is determine who is going to be the chair. And so obviously I'm on the agenda to open the meeting, but as we move through the process, it's important that we have someone who is acting in the chair role. I will give you my opinion. I think that part of the process as we talk through with even having leadership from our towns as well as parents, students, and administrators and community reps, I think it's important that the chair of the building committee is a resident and taxpayer, right? I think for me, I'm the hired help, and ultimately, it's hard for me to stand as the chair and say, we need to do this because it doesn't impact me as a constituent. And so that will be my 2 cents of what I would like to throw out there as far as who I believe it makes sense to have as a chair. And then I think it's important to have a vice chair who would step in to be able to to be a partner with the chair and keep the process moving. So I don't know, I know school committee, you were heavily involved in the establishing of this committee. I don't know if you have specific opinions or other people do. I'll put that out there.
I mean, yeah, so I guess I appreciate and agree with what you said, that it is important for someone who's a resident and taxpayer to sort of sit in those seats that are going to be, I don't want to say they're the loudest, right, because they're the servants of the committee, but they are definitely public-facing at times, right? If anybody's going to be talking to the press or opening a info session or anything like that, that's typically, who the person is going to be. I think it's important to share those roles share the weight of those, I guess, across goals. I'm going to throw Matt under the bus here, sorry, Matt, and just say that I think there should be a school committee member simply because the recommendations have to go back to the school committee, so it's going to take some work. And Matt, actually, there's 2 reasons I'm throwing him under the bus. So there's that. One is that he led the facilities subcommittee, so he already has all the background on the work that we did there because he was the chair for that. And then the other piece of that is I think it's important to not have the school committee leadership and the building committee leadership be the same people. I sit as the chair on the school committee, and I think it's important to show that the school committee is not leading this group, even if it's, we need a strong liaison, we need to have somebody who's sort of integral to that process, but that it's not the school committee sort of trying to force down an opinion through school committee leadership. So I think Matt should be one. My argument would be chair, and then I personally think it should be, no offense to you guys, but I think it's going to be hard to have one of you 3 sitting in there and not the other 2, which is going to be tough, right? I think probably a parent rep or one of the community reps, I don't know who is willing to do that. Somebody can jump forward if you want. I will say, serving as the school committee vice chair, which I'm assuming this will be relatively similar, like it's a support position, right? It's the person who jumps in when, the chair needs someone to listen, right, and provide some feedback, but it's also the person who jumps in to lead a meeting later on in the process if the chair can't make it. So it's not tremendous as far as the commitment goes.
If I can say one thing too, I forgot to say. So on the list, on the roster of 18, the MSBA allows us to determine who the voting members are. If you look across the range of projects, cities, towns, regions, it ranges from a committee of monstrous size with a few votes to huge with a lot of votes to small with small votes. The committee chose to make it that there were 18 members, 16 are voting members. So while we're electing a chair, the chair doesn't hold any more power than every one of us do in the collective. We don't have students voting. Sorry, guys, not that you don't have a valued opinion, but when we're likely making a decision about a project that's going to be measured in the tens or hundreds of millions, we felt like maybe we leave this one to those who will be paying the bills. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that we do, on that roster, it does delineate that all of the other 16 non-student reps are voting members, which is an important piece of that discussion.
I'd like to make a motion to make Matt Landers the chair.
I'll second.
So I think I'm still in charge of this. So I hear a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
He'll do a great job.
I don't see anyone screaming to be the chair.
Matt, you didn't say if you actually wanted it.
Patrick,
I'm
we're
fine.
not raised,
Yeah, they don't usually
that's not a
ask you,
topic
but
for
that's
discussion.
usually how
I'm
it
in charge of
works.
this meeting now.
But
Can all
I
of
have no problem doing it.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Patrick's such a good guy. All right, so all in favor as Matt as our chair? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? Okay. So Matt, I'm going to hand the reins. You are officially the chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone that wants to be the vice chair from the three of you?
I'd like to know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You,
Yeah, I'd be interested, but, I'm relatively, have a little bit of a cold. Relatively new to the area, so I would be pretty objective. I've worked with the MSBA in the past. I know the process. I've been chairman of the building committee in my previous town. I know what it's like to take the heat, including being in public, in the press, and everything else. So I'll throw my name for consideration.
okay, can I get a motion? Unless,
I'll move that.
all those in favor, oh, any
Second.
discussion? Sorry.
A second.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else with a burning
Any
desire?
discussion?
I would just say that all three of us selectmen, we can help with our, the newspapers and stuff like that. We're kind of good with that. I was willing to be vice chair. A couple of people asked me, but you have more experience in their technical part of this. But if
I'm a
you
new
help,
guy, so I'm
There's
just.
a motion on the floor. You
I'll
can't
defer.
back out.
no, and obviously the select board members were really busy to begin with. But politically, if you need us to speak or anything like that, and anyone who knows me, I'm not scared of cameras and I'm not scared to say my opinion. So, wherever I can do to help out, that's all.
Anyone else?
Who seconded it, Matt?
Narissa did. Yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now we're on to the process overview.
Can I ask one question before we go on? Sorry.
Sorry.
I know that some building committees have a secretary, just because while we have someone doing the minutes, someone needs to go ahead and approve the minute, put their approval on the minutes for them to come back and be approved here. I don't know if that's something that we want to have a separate secretary for, or if that's something that should be, the committee would prefer that the chair or vice chair do, but I just think it's sort of important to handle that up front before we have a problem as far as what the chain of approval is.
Yeah, I guess the question is, so my assistant Nicole will be doing minutes from the recordings. The question is, for our chair and vice chair, do you want a secretary to take that on, to just be the person that Nicole sends them to and says, does this look like the meeting you attended? Or would you rather that be the two of you?
It doesn't matter either way to me.
Personally, I think Nicole does a great job with minutes, so if she's going to listen to the recordings and then present them to the chair and vice chair,
Yep.
she does a great job. I just think it's a lot for somebody sitting around this table to do.
So she's definitely going to do the minutes from the recording. The secretary would literally be just another person that's just going to verify them. That's all it would be, not drafting them. Nope.
Mike?
It sounds like you would want more than our clerk instead of a secretary, because the clerk would be able to sign the minutes. Like our select boards, we have a clerk, not a secretary.
Yeah, I don't know how we want to do it, and I believe once we have an OPM, the OPM will actually be doing minutes, and then that person would, so, yeah, I mean, I think, I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, I guess. When we did Pine Grove, I believe Joe did them. I don't believe we had anybody that did them specifically. I think Joe just,
Joe Perry?
yeah, because he was the chair.
He actually wrote the minutes?
No,
No,
somebody
he
else did them, and
Yeah,
then
that's
he
what I
just
thought.
approved
Okay.
them.
He approved, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I think it might be a redundant position.
Okay, so moving on from that.
All right, so we'll just share them with the two of you, and you can say, yep, those look good.
All right, next item on the agenda is the process overview. I'm going to hand it back to Brian.
Okay, so again, the goal for tonight is we're not making decisions. We're not, right, if you look at this agenda at first, it's like, oh my gosh, we're here till midnight. The idea is to make sure everyone's clear on the process. So By way of timelines, we are in partnership with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We submitted 3 statements of interest in 22, 23, and 24 calendar year. We submitted in the spring of each year. We learned in 22 and 23 we weren't accepted. In 24 we were accepted. So on December 13th, we went to the virtual board meeting. We were welcomed into eligibility. Our eligibility period is Module 1. So on the page that was included with your agenda, and again, if you are looking at the board docs agenda, which will stay there, if you go back in each of these titles, take you to the MSBA site, and so you can look at in detail what each of these modules entail. The eligibility period is what we are in now. It's a 270-day or 9-month period. Started for us on February 3rd. It expires on October 31st. In that first phase, I'll go through what the deliverables are. There's a lot of things like setting up this committee, getting the funding for that first feasibility study. A lot of, we have to certify our design enrollment. There's capital planning documentation that we're putting together, a lot of facilities, practice, and costs John's working on. And so some educational questionnaires that kind of talk about, this is what the building that exists, this is what we're thinking about, very, very high level. All of the tasks in this first stage are administrative. There isn't anything that this group needs to formally vote on. That's not true, because you will come back and you will have to approve a feasibility study agreement at the very end, which will outline the budget. But largely, the eligibility period is a lot of pro forma work to get us ready. We have to have that done, all of the paperwork, all the submittals within 9 months or 270 days. Following that is when the real fun kicks off. So when we get into Module 2, that's choosing the design team, the project team. So it will be an owner's project manager that we will choose in partnership with the MSBA. It's a very prescribed process. That is the role that Jim fills in other projects. So the owner's project manager becomes our voice, advocating for us throughout the project, and is just what the title says. They become our project manager to oversee this process through all the intricacies that go on over the 4, 5, 6 years that follow. Following that, once we have an OPM, we select a designer. Again, prescribed process in partnership with the MSBA. That designer and OPM team is the group that then does Module 3 and 4, which is the feasibility study and the schematic design. That schematic design is that concept. In the feasibility study, we have to look at every possible option. We have to look at knockdown rebuild to new site, brand new build. I think the MSBA in recent years has allowed, tell me if you disagree in your experience, but has allowed districts to more quickly rule out if there is no other location for a new building. Used to go through more extensive planning and requirements. In our conversations with the MSBA so far, we've said, right, there's this campus, our regional agreement says that the campus is in Byfield for the 3 towns. It's central for the 3 towns. It would require a pretty broad response for us to talk about other locations. So I think they'll let us quickly check that box. But we have to look at a knockdown rebuild, a remodel, a combination of keeping some and remodeling and knocking down and building new for other sections. Ultimately, what the MSBA wants to do is say that we are partnering with Triton on a solution that makes sense for at least 50 years, right? That this is a long-term plan, and they're going to partner with us to say these are the things that we will participate in and have that be a reimbursable cost, and then these are things you're on your own. So we can make local decisions that make sense to us, but if it doesn't meet MSBA guidelines, classroom size, gyms, auditoriums, different square footage requirements, then they'll say, you can do that on your own, that's fine. If it meets their requirements, those are the pieces that they will reimburse us for. So we know early on that they told us our reimbursement for the feasibility phase is about 47.5%. So of that feasibility budget, we'll get reimbursed about 47.5% of that cost. And so the committee has been working to set that money aside, so we do not. One of those boxes to check in Module 1 that we're in now is getting the funding for a feasibility study. The vast majority of communities go out to the taxpayers to borrow that money. Working with our towns, we've been meeting with towns since 2019 when we first did the facilities assessment here. We have money, we have roughly 1.7 million in stabilization, and that is earmarked specifically for this feasibility study. So that allows us to move a little quicker than waiting for a town meeting for a vote for an override and such. But that is a first part and a big piece of that puzzle that we won't need to solve, which is a good thing. So that feasibility study agreement that we'll sign by the time we close out this current module will specifically articulate our percentage, and the second piece of that we're working now is our enrollment. So the enrollment will drive how many square feet they will participate in. So our most recent project at Pine Grove, it was a 91,000 square foot building. The design enrollment, I forget the exact number, but it called for a 63,000 square foot facility. And so we did some creative things with the designer and the OPM to maximize some existing space into extended learning areas that became reimbursable. But ultimately, when we say 47% of the cost is reimbursable, that's of eligible expenses. There will be some things that are not eligible, and that gets even broader when we get into modules 4 and beyond, when we're talking about the actual schematic design and construction costs. That is a lot more nuanced about what is and what is not reimbursable. So that will be the work we will manage. Right? Those will be kind of the big discussions we'll be having is about what becomes reimbursable and what's not reimbursable, what does the design look like, and those high-level decisions that will be big on the agenda for this group. So 2 and 3 project 2 is identifying that team, designer and OPM. Feasibility study and schematic design are those early study. The study, what do we need? What's the right solution? And then come up with preferred schematic designs that ultimately say, we believe, and in partnership with the MSBA, there's board votes in here from them as well. We believe this is the right idea. This is the most cost-effective, best, most efficient way to meet the educational needs we've identified and a cost-effective solution. So we actually need a vote at that point in between 4 and 6. 5 is that middle part where we're making that decision and saying, this is the design, this is the cost. That's when we put it out to voters and say, we need your approval here. So that vote it is required to pass in all 3 towns. Our regional agreement, most recently, Whittier used a different statutory methodology for approval of a project, which was a single vote on a single day at a specified time in all 11 of the member communities. And it's a majority vote of all in combination. We will be doing this town by town per our regional agreement. That's the way our regional agreement reads. So this has to pass by a simple majority, but it has to pass in Newbury, Rowley, and Salisbury for a project to move forward. So that module 5 will be a huge kind of benchmark for us, right? That's what we'll be working towards to make a design and a budget that we believe that we as a collective group with a lot of other people can sell to our constituents as the best solution moving forward. We all agree we're sitting here because there is a need, right? There's no doubt that there's a need, that this building is aging and failing in multiple places. The idea is that by the time we get to Module 5, we're agreeing a solution that's cost-effective, the right educational decision for 50 years, and something that we believe that we can all go back to our member towns and support. 6, 7, and 8, right? 6 is the big, right? That's the construction, or the bidding, the final bidding, in moving into the construction phase, which is 7, and then 8 is the closeout. The work of this group winds down quite a bit by the time we get to 8. On the next page, there's just a quick timeline, and this is a, what's that phrase, too early prediction. This is a very, very high-level little graphic that I put together just to try and give everyone a clear sense of the timelines we're talking about. Again, as I mentioned, we are in Module 1 now. That is eligibility, 270 days or 9 months, began on February 3rd, is done on October 31st, and here I wrote, or sooner. We are working to get these first called boxes checked as soon as we possibly can. The sooner we can check all these boxes and all of these submissions, the sooner we can get on to selecting our OPM and designer and starting the important work of making those decisions. So that is, we are contingent on, again, that middle red star there. We need a vote to move out of Module 1 into Module 2, which is starting to select the project team. August 27th, there's a June date, an August date, an October date, and a December date. By design, the MSBA assumes it takes us 9 months to get all the things done. And I'll just, on the next page, I'll talk about specifically what we're doing. We have 270 days to do that. And then they'll get their ducks in a row, and we would be on that December 12th agenda to be welcomed into Module 2. We've been speaking with them, Diane Sullivan from the MSBA, on each of our submissions of the statements of interest, saying this is time sensitive, the building is failing, we need to keep moving. And so we've spoken with them about accelerating that a bit. And so they have said to us, December 12th is the assumption. Very safely, we know we can be on the December 12th to be welcomed into the Module 2. They have said October 29th is a very reasonable goal. That would require we have all of Module 1 deliverables in by the summer. That allows them the first few months of the fall, latter summer and first few months of the fall, to get everything prepared for the board, and then we're on that October 29th agenda. If that were the case, we're then we're 3 months ahead. The August 27th was aggressive, I believe is the term that they used when I said, is it possible? They said, they won't say it's impossible, but I can tell you already, just with the work we're doing, it's highly unlikely we're going to get stuff in time to get on that August agenda. It's still possible. And then I said, what about the June meeting? And she said, Brian, knock it off. So these are our most likely, again, December 12th, absolute. October 29th, I think is probably, I would say to you today, where we are in the process, the most reasonable agenda for us to target, that we're getting all of the information done that I'll talk about on the next slide, in by the summer again, and then we're at the board meeting on the 29th. And then starting in November, we're selecting our OPM and designer, and then by the spring, we're rolling. So Module 1 is what we're in now. That next vote is key. And then again, Module 2 is the project team. It's approximately 6 months. Again, these are all very approximate. So somewhere between October and December we start. We finish that somewhere between March and June of 26. And then this bottom row starts to get very hypothetical, right? I think we're talking at very, very high level assumptions. Module 3, which is feasibility, is about a year, roughly speaking, of votes required to move from Module 3 into Module 4, schematic design, roughly a year. And then we're, that big vote, again, that blue box, the lighter blue boxes are heavy on our involvement. The darker blue boxes are much more at the direction of OPM and or construction managers in the actual work being done. But again, that Module 5 is when we sign that agreement, we have the number, we have the preferred design, and we're bringing that to the voters. So on this, the way it's mapped out, we're talking spring or fall of 2028. If that is where we land, then Module 6 and 7, finalizing everything in the actual construction, 2 to 3 years. We're talking into 2030, 2031, before the project is done. And again, we're talking about done, site work is done. If we're talking about, if I was making a too early projection, I think we're going to end up with some kind of phased remodel, partial rebuild, and reuse some space. If that was the case, it's going to be phased, and there's going to be site work, and it will be well after we move into the building fully that everything is really done and vehicles are driving off, checking the box as finished. So, I'm going to pause there and see if there are questions, disagreements, if that sounds reasonable, or...
We should hire you as an OPM.
No, next life. I went to school for architecture, yeah.
No, I think that generally outlines it.
Okay.
There is the ability to accelerate timeframes, but as you know, in talking to Diane, they kind of frown on it. They have their process, they have their board dates. They don't like people to vary from that. We have gotten the feasibility and schematic done quicker than 24 months, but it's relatively rare.
I have a question. So there's nothing that goes out to any of the 3 towns for a vote next spring?
Correct.
I think there's some misinformation out there.
Okay. Yes. So it would be and I mean, there's been lots of discussion, so I wouldn't even venture a guess of where it came from. But yes, there was early on, before we had money in stabilization, and that didn't become a reality over the last 4 years, we would have been, right? So to move in, we would be looking this spring or this fall before October 31 to take that vote, and that would have been, $1.5 million to $2 million for the feasibility and schematic. That would have been the case, but that is not the case. So the money is there to be able to do the feasibility. Yeah.
I think it's important to clarify, too, that funding is from ESSER, the ESSER grants. So it was the federal COVID grants that was set aside specifically for this purpose.
So $1 million of it was ESSER grants, and then $500,000 came out of excess and deficiency, which is the equivalent of, as a regional school district, we operate almost like a town within a town. And so a town has free cash, and I know everyone hates the term free cash, but it's their word. The states where that their free cash is the equivalent of our excess and deficiency. So at the end of every year, if we have a budget of $10 million and we spend 9.75, 250,000 is certified as excess and deficiency, and it gets, our towns know the number, and we either use it to offset budgets or in this case, moved to $500,000 along with $1 million from ESSER, and then now the school committee. 3 years ago now, three and a half years ago, established a policy to start funding this so that in the spirit of short term, we had that initial deposit, if you will, to fund a feasibility study, but moving forward, the budget adds $150,000 to stabilization every year so that we don't, right? A lot of this discussion over the last 6 years with our towns and internally has been setting up systems and structures and processes so that we don't have a building that starts to fail as quickly as the current one did. So yeah, good point. There is no vote coming. Could it happen, to Jim's point, could it happen earlier than 28? Possibly. I don't think it's unlikely, yeah. So any other questions?
I know some of you know we were on we did a study already. Is that something that you think this whole body should know and understand what was said in that study?
You're talking about the building?
Yeah, the facilities,
From 2018, is that?
the one we just completed.
So, yeah, so good, yes.
Some of that discussion was about how we want to keep the 2 gyms, our terrarium.
Yep.
Everyone doesn't know that here, so.
Yes. So I think that starts to get into detail. So over the last year, the school committee established a facilities subcommittee, of which Matt was the chair, and we worked with a rep from each of our towns, and building off of the comprehensive facilities assessment we did in 2019 was recosted in 2021. The estimate with Habib and Associates was just to fix everything, right? Not improve anything, but if it's broken, fix it. Redo windows, right? Just what exists, replace it, was about $63 million. That was the kind of the basis of the discussion with the towns to say, look, if we do that, we don't get any reimbursement from anyone, and it's just, right, the phrase, putting lipstick on a pig. So the idea was, look, if we can move toward a project and a partnership with the MSBA where we can redesign, renovate, whatever the right solution is, and they're going to pay half of it, that makes a whole lot more sense as a long-term educational, well, there are two principals sitting here, right, educational vision for this campus and what we can provide for our students. So over the last year, after two failures through the MSBA, not failures, that's not a right word, two no's. Waiting for the future, yes. We were watching as students, right? Students, families, teachers, everyone watching the building as it existed and what was happening. We said we cannot wait. And so we met, worked with Habib and Associates. The designer selection law allows us to spend up to $30,000 without bidding. So anything over $30,000 has to be a sealed or competitive bidding process. And so we worked with Habib and Associates, who did that original comprehensive assessment, and we partnered with them with a contract for $29,900 and said, we just want to study, like, what is possible here? What is it that we could do? And so we started with the questions are, what is it that we would need to improve, right? If we're going to invest, what do we need to do? And obviously, it was security and safety, and it was general building flow, and what was the third thing?
Keeping the water out?
Keeping the water, I mean, that was, yes. Every problem in this building is about water.
Handicap accessibility.
Accessibility and just, so where we landed was a renovation that largely, and again, this was very conceptual, right? So this was not schematic. Kevin Provencher from Habib and Associates was very clear to continually say, this is a concept, right? There was it was just basic working off of plans, making general square footage assumptions. To all of the classroom learning spaces, it assumed we would refresh those. New ceilings, lights, new HVAC, new flooring. It wouldn't move walls. It wouldn't change the structure in general. It enclosed the high school entry courtyard and moved a combined side-by-side middle school office admin suite to the end of the middle school with guidance on the second story. It split this room in half, bring the library up, and made usable space downstairs. And that was really it as far as innovation. Other than that, it was just really updating.
We talked about moving the cafeteria as well.
We talked about it, but couldn't, right? That was one of those things where without a redesign, it just wasn't possible. So that estimate, concept, was $172 million. So taking that number, it was an easy decision then to say, if we're welcomed into the MSBA, there is no discussion to be had, right? Even if, I think the going rate we keep hearing people talk about is $1,000 a square foot. If we're talking $1,000 a square foot, this building is 286,000 square feet. Anyone who operates in this building, there is a lot of wasted, spread out space in this building. If you look at Pentucket, that was just recently built, 3 stories, about just a touch over 200,000 square feet. Feels like there's actually more usable space than this facility. So we know we're going to get less. With current enrollment around 850, we're not going to get 280,000 square feet reimbursable. So all of that, if we went straight 1,000 per square foot and called it a 200,000 square foot space, we're talking about 200 million. And if we get 50% reimbursement, it's 100 million. And so we're spending less for a completely redone building. So that was I appreciate you bringing that up, Mike. I mean, that was the exercise we went through. And it arrived at a no-brainer, right? There is no discussion to be had if we were welcomed in. And thank God we were welcomed in on December 13th. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was well explained. Some of the people who weren't involved, I want them to know that we've already been talking a lot about what they may think that we need to talk about.
Yep.
And if we could just share that study with them, so maybe bring some people up to speed to where we're all on the same playing field.
Yep. That's a great point, yeah. So part of that is, as we talked about through that process, that some of the thinking that we've already gone through, anything we did was so high level and schematic, it's not going to be used, right, by the OPM and the designer as any kind of design actual document, but it speaks to the thinking we went through. So we know, right, we had talked through that process, huge value, the gymnasiums. We have a middle school gymnasium, old high school gym, and then the rebuilt high school gym. We are unique in having two gymnasiums. During basketball season, always full, right? All of our youth sports, they're the only gyms in towns, and so this is like heavily used. It's very safe to say that with 850 students on this campus, we would never get two gyms reimbursed through the state. We might not even get the size of the high school gym reimbursed fully. So we talked about how do we make sure we maintain those spaces. Similarly, the auditorium, we have an 820 seat auditorium. The Pentucket Auditorium, I think, is 350 total. So we would never get an 850 seat auditorium in partnership with the MSBA. So as part of that discussion around the table was all of our classrooms are undersized per MSBA guidelines, 750 to 775 square feet. They want them 825 to 850 for a traditional classroom. So how can we preserve the auditorium and the gyms, rehab those, even if it's partially on not reimbursable, and then have the other rest of the space reimbursable, right? So that idea speaks to a phased reno, rehab, rebuild, which would be all kinds of fun for the couple of years of construction, but very doable, right? I mean, that's these companies come in and they do it. They make it happen in a safe way. So great discussions. I think we started in March and ended just before in December, and I think it was a great thought exercise in deciding what we think we need and don't need. So.
Are you incorporating the deliverables into what you're?
I think I shared those. So that on that next page, just a listing of each of the things that are due. The certification was a signed form. Building committee, here we go. We'll get that document in, signed with a first meeting by Friday. The profile and questionnaire and enrollment projection is in process. The enrollment meetings, these are the parts, as Jim mentioned, we're trying to go fast. We are reliant, especially with enrollment, on the MSBA, and so we're getting that data to them, but they welcome 22 districts in this year, and so they've phased them starting February. We were the earliest through Ipswich and Whittier, who are the two that are coming back to get their second bite at the apple. They're this summer. So there's a lot of phasing happening, and so we're reliant on them, but that's a key piece is that enrollment meeting. And then the rest of that capital planning, John's loving that exercise. It's a lot of data getting them. And then that local vote authorization will actually be, I take it back, I had said that it would be a vote of this group. It wouldn't be a vote of this group. It'll be a vote of the school committee to appropriate those funds. They're funds that the committee has, so it is not anything, all of the model language from the MSBA talks about overrides. It's going to be a very simple vote. And then that feasibility study agreement, I don't know if you know this, Jim, is that off of a recommendation of, this is usually pre-OPM, so not your world. Yeah, so I don't believe that needs a school building committee vote either. I think that is a school committee process, and that would be, we've agreed the enrollment, which agrees the square footage that will be able to be reimbursed through the process and how much we'll get reimbursed of the feasibility. So.
When is our enrollment meeting?
So the enrollment meeting, it has to be held by August 1st, and these are all soft right, rolling, it all has to be done by October 31st. So we're working, my assistant Nicole and I are working on gathering the data. So she's been in contact with your towns, the 3 towns and the clerks we have to get births over the past few years. We have to get building permits and future building permits. And so it's the MSBA's way of getting a picture of what do the towns exist now for population and what's the likelihood of the growth in coming years. So.
Okay, any questions? All right, want to move on to resource review.
Someone else wants to talk?
You like to talk.
So just to point you to a few things that we will keep updated, there is a Google Calendar. It's now, if you go to the main Triton website, you can actually subscribe to various calendars. Each school has a calendar, district-wide events, first day, last day, vacations. School committee has a calendar. There's now a school building committee calendar, so that you can subscribe to it. When the event's posted, it will pop right into your calendar if you're that type of person, or you can just find it there. That's the direct link. We did set up on the main website a building project website. It's pretty much a shell at this point, a little bit of information. The calendar is embedded there. We'll start publishing. The YouTube channel will be linked off of that, as well as a link back to board docs, which is where the meeting agendas will be, and the minutes will be included right with the agendas. As I mentioned, there will be a YouTube channel. It's there. There's no videos yet. As of tomorrow, there will be a video. And then the last thing, just to bring to your attention, this isn't something we're need to decide on tonight. Dave Cartoonan, I think he used to be a TV personality for like Channel 7 or something. He has this company called Cartoon EDU, and was trying to break into the education space in general, and has found his niche with MSBA process. And so on the second page, and if you go to the board docs agenda that I had sent out, and it's live, each of these where it says Wilmington, Hamilton, Wenham, Situate, each of those are these short videos, and they have them, they're largely canned, right? But they, for short money, about $700, will tailor the videos as just another communication vehicle to get information out throughout the process. And so I think this is something we had talked about. It's not necessarily on the agenda right now. We had talked with the school committee about the fact, I think by the time we're welcomed in, whether that happens in late October or in December, that as a group, we want to talk about partnering with a marketing firm, right? That early and often, we want to make sure there is clear and maybe pervasive isn't the right word, but clear and consistent communication throughout this process. We'll post the videos, we'll post the minutes. People don't watch minutes or videos that are longer than 90 seconds or 3 minutes, and people sure as heck aren't jumping in to read minutes. So we want to make sure that as best we can throughout this process, people are hearing real time the conversations we're having, the challenges, the struggles, what we're leaning towards, what we're not thinking about. And so I think this will be another tool. So if you want to take a look at those, next time we can talk about that, what we think is, does this make sense? Again, short money. And so it could be something where we just, agree one at a time. There was a proposal that he had given me that's just an overview. So for $700, and that would be a kind of a decision, does the school committee want to spend the money? Just a quick snippet of here's where we are in the process, where this, going through module 1, here's what the hope is. And then a next one maybe in the fall to say, hey, to your point, Christine, there's no vote happening next year, right? The feasibility is funded. In all likelihood, the soonest we'll be coming to you is sometime in 2028. So just something to share for you or with you. If you have any thoughts, be happy to chat with you about that.
So we're going to agree to it, and then obviously it's going to have to go to the school committee for a vote to spend the money.
So I mean, it's $700, so it wouldn't have to be specifically a vote. If we were going to spend this, I think the discussion to have with the committee is, with the school committee, is do you want every dollar spent on this project heretofore coming out of stabilization, so we're tracking it, right? So part of the process is when you allocate the money through a vote for the feasibility study, it will set up a separate project fund strictly for the purpose of tracking. So do we want to wait and not spend any money? Obviously, as principals and teachers will tell you, this year got tight, and so we're not spending any other money right now. So maybe it's something we hold off and we're not ready to start communicating yet. But
I think the sooner we can get videos out, the better, because there's already confusion and misinformation.
Okay.
I don't know how anyone else feels.
To that point, how do the town representatives get this information out to their towns? Because I'm thinking, we have select board meetings twice a month, or sometimes it's every week. And I think for a lot of townspeople who don't have children in the Triton district, would it be beneficial for those, if this happened, those 90-second clips to be showed at our select board meetings too, or be part of the agenda, and keeping the lines of communication open so that we can educate our communities?
Yeah.
I mean, Mike and Alicia, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but.
I wonder how many people actually watch our select board meetings, so, I mean.
I know they watch them in Raleigh, because I've been told.
I would agree, and SCTV, you can track how many, and it's on average about 1,000 people watch our selectmen's meetings, so I agree. We need to get the information out better than our previous regional school that didn't get the information out. So anything we can do to stay on top of the information, I totally agree with you.
Would these videos be shareable on social media?
Yes, they would be. Yeah, and they're generally 2 to 3 minutes. So again, 90 seconds is perfect, but I don't know if anyone clicked on that in the thing, but we can send it out. And I can actually send out to the group that first video of what it would, the similar, what it would look like. And if we think it makes sense, something we can move towards getting just that first one, which is just an explainer, just that basic, here's where we are in the process. You're going to hear lots of things. We're going slow to go fast. And we can tailor that and put content in, and even put the URL for the website. Check out this website. We'll be sharing stuff, but if you have questions, reach out to. But I think to your question, Christine, I think this group, I think it's helpful for the three of you to be sitting at this table, and then this group to make decisions about how the project funds are spent to that end, right? Because it has to be, it's great. I mean, we can make all the wise decisions and efficient and effective educational decisions in the world, but if people aren't aware and clear about what's happening, when it comes time for that, magic star in module 5 and we're looking for that vote, it's just not going to happen. So.
How does this committee feel about, can this sheet here be presented at an upcoming select board meeting, just for, at least, I can't speak for the other two towns, but for Raleigh, I think there's some misinformation out there. This clearly explains it. Is that something that I could share Monday evening, or do you want me to hold off on that? It's up to you guys.
I'm always talking.
Just the sheet.
Yeah.
I would say share, in my opinion. Only, again, we have to make sure we stay on top of the information. I also would add, with social media, who is the key person from this committee that's going to be working with social media? I think we need one person who's focused, okay, this is my role, I got to make sure I get this out. And then also whoever that is, I would like, as I'm one of the admin on the alumni page, to make sure the alumni gets behind this, because as we all know, the alumni can really, really get votes out. So I want to make sure they are involved and they understand what's going on.
Because most of the alumni have children that go to the school district.
That's right.
Yes, we do.
Yep. Yeah, and I keep shutting myself off. Katie Lakey does our social media and can certainly pump stuff out. I think this goes to the discussion about once we're in it, right? Once we're getting into that selecting an OPM and designer, I think there's value in a marketing firm and not spending $100,000, but spending money where it's being drafted and consistent, and there's a marketing plan, so that it's not at the whim of who has enough time that day, and even if it's one person. I just think that it's that steady and consistent messaging. That's just really, everyone I've spoken to that's done projects, the thing that they have said that's gone the best and things go smoothly throughout the process is when there's communication, especially even after, right? Especially we get the vote, we're not done communicating when people say yes, right? People then have to believe that this group is following through the investment, whatever the vote is and the investment, that this group is seeing it through all the way to that audit with the MSBA to say we're coming in under budget, right? It's not that it's just once there's a blank check written that we're done with that point, so, yeah.
I got to pick on you a little bit when you say we're coming in under budget. Be careful saying that, please.
We're going to try.
I know, but you got to be careful saying that because some people will assume that I want it under budget.
Yeah.
So
This is true.
Just
Okay, so
going
we
to
can
add too, I think it's, there are some districts that do it really well, and I think it would behoove us, if anybody has time, to take a look at those districts and see what we find is really compelling to have some thoughts to bring to the table. I actually saw Hamilton Wenham's through their social media before I even saw them on here, so it was nice to know that the firm that Brian had talked to was actually a firm I had already seen out there, and theirs is, I mean, I have no idea if their vote's going to pass or fail, but I have to say their communication is really well done. Like, I don't live in the towns, I'm not talking to anyone there, and I understand where their project is at, why they're making those decisions, and sort of what's happening next. And I think, as someone that's outside the town and doesn't have a direct link there, that's well done. To my thinking.
Okay, so we can make a decision on that next time? Perfect. And then visioning process.
So this is part of, back in that graphic, Christine, and I think just to close that loop, yes, I would say handing this out as much as possible as a two-pager, two-sided document with the 8 modules on one side and the graphic. I think sharing it at select board meetings, and we can work with PTAs to get this information out for sure. But in module 3, in feasibility, there is a component of that where we're creating an educational program. That sets the vision for what we want, right? We can talk nuts and bolts and windows and doors and HVAC. The educational program sets the vision for what we want for our students for the next 50 years and beyond. In the projects, in people I've spoken with where the project went really well, they got a jump on that process. And so there are, larger cities and towns that are doing capital long-term planning and doing this routinely in partnership with design firms and educational planners. Smaller districts like ours, we don't tend to engage in that fairly routinely. But I think it's something that it would behoove us to get a jump on. And so that's been, I had mentioned it to some school committee members just in passing. I guess I don't know if it's is it a vote of this committee, or if it's approval, or I don't know what the right word is here, but as a concept to throw out, I think it would have to be the school committee establishing the funding at this point, because it would have to come through stabilization, and some of those mechanics that have to happen about the funding and how that happens. But I think it would be wise for us to spend some money and start that process, so that as we're entering into, again, module 2, once we've selected that team, so sometime between next March and June, as we're actually starting that feasibility study, that we have some sense of where we want to go. I don't think I mentioned this, as part of the design submission, over the years, we had talked about various configurations. That's always a question with the MSBA. Are you consolidating? Are you reconfiguring? If you look at the approval for this project is the Triton Regional High School with a co-located middle school to study the continuation of the co-location, right? So it's because there are two buildings, or one building, shared building with two separate and distinct schools. They're called LEA codes. That's the way they had to do the approval. So there's been discussion about the study of the co-location or a different configuration, 7 through 12. A lot of smaller middle high schools have moved towards a combined secondary campus. So that's been part of the discussion over the years, and is that something to study? As well as bringing up sixth grade from the elementaries to the middle school. I think there's a much stronger argument, or would be a stronger argument, if we were having overcrowding at the elementary schools and with space issues. We have plenty of square footage over here with the redesign. So I think and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, Jim, but in speaking with, talking to Brad Dorr, who designed Pine Grove School, or Mike Perillo, who did an education study as part of our statement of interest, any work that we can do ahead of time that can help streamline that will save us time and dollars in the study phase. If we can say, you know what, we really don't believe sixth grade over here is going to be right for us right now because it doesn't fit in with this vision. So I think the early work would be kind of a smaller group starting to talk through what the vision is, do some site visits to other schools that are recently designed to look at concepts, bring that back to a larger group, obviously the building committee involved, to talk about this is the kind of the hopes and dreams, not on a design yet, but the hopes and dreams. So I don't know if you have.
Yeah, the only one thing I would say about that, what we've run into on occasion is once you start mixing sixth grade with seniors, there's a socialization question that comes up from parents or communities, and that has come up as far as the visioning process and how do you separate them? Should you separate them? Does it matter? So that's come up a few times in different areas in the Commonwealth. I don't know that this region will matter, but it's certainly something that's been discussed. It's sort of a nuance to the visioning process, and that plays into the program as well as the distinct buildings and the separation or not.
Yeah, I think those would be two distinct. If we were talking about bringing the sixth grade up, I would see that as still a distinct middle school and a distinct high school. The other end of that is if sixth grade stays in place, is it some form of a more shared, combined 7 through 12 campus? And there's variations all over the board, right, about what that looks like. Have you had experience with kind of vision work being done before the designer selection process?
Yeah, yes, for the reasons you stated, because then you would really accelerate the design process. Mm-hmm. But whoever you select as the designer is going to have their own thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so they're going to offer their independent opinion based on their experience. But if this group or the whole community is behind the vision that's been vetted through some social media or other things, it's a tricky place to go sometimes, then the architect will generally follow, and you will accelerate the process a little bit.
Okay.
How much?
Come on, it's my first meeting.
Put you right on the spot.
You're the vice chair.
You could, maybe a month or two, but really the key thing there is there's also money involved and decision-making, and if there's a consensus for certain, seems like you already have a consensus on reno and addition, so that's way ahead of a lot of districts that we've dealt with in the past, which is great. Maybe a month or two. It's really the programming and the decision-making and whether or not votes need to be taken and who's involved. But you could shave off a couple months. When I said it's feasible to get under 2 years, that was one of the things I was thinking about. I think we did one in about 20 months, but MSBA challenged us all the way along. They didn't really like it.
The starting early?
The accelerated feasibility and schematic design, which was the result of an accelerated visioning process ahead of time.
Can I just add one thought? It would be great talking about the grade configurations, not just sort of physical space, but I would love to have a discussion around research related to academic outcomes for different grade spans. There's lots out there. That would be a good topic of discussion for the group, I think.
I'm going to piggyback off Christine because she's brought it up a couple of times with the sixth grade moving into the middle school. I don't know if it'd fall into this, but it was, we have had those talks, I'll say, because I'm tongue twisted for some reason, of budgetary reasons, moving sixth grade to here. So there was talks on that, if we can, streamline the budget a little to help the school committee to, and the administration fund the school system too. I think that needs to be considered.
I think that needs to be studied, right? I think on, if we were overcrowded and looking for more space, that would be an economics discussion. It would make sense. That's not where we are. Pine Grove is the fullest right now as far as space, in classroom space. But I don't know if there's economics there. There may be. But I think my guess is when we get to, if that was something we were formally studying and recommended to the MSBA, there'd be a hard sell that without that overcrowding, how it actually becomes more cost beneficial to do that. I think ultimately the question will come down to, as you said, Erica, it'll come down to what makes educational sense, and that's part of that educational vision, which is why we need to start at that. And if we rule it out before we decide it makes sense, then the question has to be asked: could it be cost effective? And it could. We have to leave it on the table, but we should first decide that we think it makes sense for the kids. So,
Jim, Erica spoke a little bit to it on the educational side there, but with the visioning process, we've spoken so far mainly about technical pieces of that vision. Are we also considering our beliefs and hopes for the academic side or the educational experience as part of that vision process as well? Because it seems like we should have some shared messaging about what we care about in terms of learning in this facility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all part and parcel of it. I thought that I haven't seen one where that wasn't part of the conversation in the whole process.
Great, and I think we've got kind of head start on a lot of that work with some of our Portrait of a Learner stuff that we've been doing over the last 2 years that I think will tie together a lot of what we're then hoping for to come out of this building. But just in seeing some other schools that have recently been built and thinking about like what they had as mantras that they were sharing with their community on a regular basis. Pentucket's was making learning visible in all educational spaces. And if that's the messaging that you're sharing with everyone, it drives design choices.
Correct.
And so I think it's important for us to start thinking about what we might care about and believe for learning here.
As long as we can control the designer's vision.
Correct.
To carry forward the aesthetics of the school's vision. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll carry that one farther forward too, and I think to find out what that is, in part, we need to cast a wide net and make it be right. We should be listening to everyone. It's important that everybody feels like they have a stake in this process, and I think that was when we were talking about the school building committee and what the roles were, that was one of the biggest concerns I heard was how are we going to be heard? Like, we have values in this too. And I think we need to make sure that, regardless of what comes out of there, we're giving everyone a chance to be heard as part of that process before we get to that stage, right?
So with the prospect of keeping this moving, I'm hearing people believe the visioning process starting it early makes sense, right? I'm seeing mostly nods around the table. It would be, again, this group is high level, certainly taking votes on major decisions, funding, when we get to the building project. This this point would be a school committee expenditure, again, out of stabilization. Is it fair to say that the building committee thinks this is a good idea, and then we can take it up at the school committee meeting next week, put that on the agenda to discuss, and see if the committee's interested in starting that early? I think, I've spoken with lots of people, from Kevin Provencher, who did that kind of work with our group, to Brad Dorr, who designed Pine Grove, and then again, Kevin Perillo, who is an educational planner by design, right? He doesn't care about the nuts and the bolts and the HVAC and all that. He cares about visioning for the future. So it'd be partner with someone like him. There is an option to, work with a designer as well, and they start to kind of bring in those, the kind of the structure of it. Or we can say, let's start really high level and educational vision and what we're looking for. So is that safe? Does that make sense to have that this group feels like that's a wise path? We can bring it to the school committee to see if they're comfortable expending those funds out of stabilization early.
Will you have a proposal for next week?
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's a wise start on the visioning. I'm a little concerned with a designer. I would want to stop at that point, because I think we're gonna be wasting money if we're not using this, they're fighting.
Yeah, I think the design wouldn't be starting to do any design. It would be, right, if there was a designer sitting next to us, they have their interests, and a planner is hired by a designer. So it would be kind of having the construct of a designer, working with that in that process. But I also, I don't want to complicate things with, if we're working with a specific designer, and then when we're talking about the designer that would be selected in Module 2, does that rule them out? I don't know. I would be.
Yeah, typically, they would rule them out. Typically, there'd be a conflict of interest, because they'd have on paper anyway, an unfair advantage. They would know everything about what you're doing, and I think you might run into a problem, and I might agree that not going too far on the design and focusing on the vision and the learning and the teaching and the curriculum and the experience and then if there's a consensus on that, then conveying it to the selected designer.
Mm-hmm.
So does that rule out the Habib, because we use them for the facilities assessment? And
yeah, I was thinking about that, because I know we've done assessments and we can't do design.
Really? Okay.
That's just us, though. I know.
So if they're ruled out anyway.
So I think if we were talking about a design, a true education planner, not a designer, I would reach out to Mike Perillo, who he was in and did some visioning work, has an understanding of the building, has an understanding of the process thus far. That was the document that went in with that first, second, and third version of the statement of interest. So it would be someone like that who's not attached to a design firm, but they are a planner, they're educator, right? By training, they're educators. And so it would be someone like that, and it would fall under, belt and suspenders, it would fall under the designer selection law. So as long as we're not going over 30,000, we'd be able to work similar to what we did with Habib, in that Habib had done the assessment, so we continued working with him to come up with those high-level concepts.
Do you think $30,000 is really going to cover it, though?
I do for early, again, for what we'd be doing prior to getting into Module 3, I do. I think it would give us, again, we're talking about a 1 or 2 month head start, and it wouldn't be, I think when you're into the modules, every month is a full project team working. I think this would be more sporadic. As I've talked to people and planners and stuff, I think it would be a smaller team, right? This would start with leadership and educators and students, right, as a core quick group, and then expand and get larger, maybe a couple site visits, a couple listening sessions where, to your point, Narissa, where we're listening hearing from everyone, not just high school parents, but anyone in town and elementary parents. And so I think it's more, I haven't seen a proposal yet, but I will by next week. It's kind of chunks of information that are going to allow us to be prepared. It's not creating the program, right? That gets developed fully into the modules.
Is our expectation to have them study the sixth grade moving and the grade configurations?
I think that whether that's part of, to call it formally studying, I would say that's a question I want to ask, right? I think that as part of the visioning, what do we vision, and does sixth grade fit into that vision? So I think it wouldn't be that the decision would be made before we formally start, but if we can have community consensus and we have an understanding of what the community believes, of what students believe, right, from student experience, what educator believes, then we'll be in a spot to be able to say, okay, we've heard, here's the results, and we can make decisions quicker.
Okay. So I think, yeah, bring a proposal to the school committee.
Okay. I will do that. But I'm hearing, and it sounds like good advice, right? We're going to take that advice that it's keep it to the planners and not designers, so we don't rule and create any conflicts with any potential designers. Okay. All right.
And then next is the setting the feasibility budget.
So that is just an FYI, right? So, and Jim will probably be helpful in this. The MSBA, when you ask for help in setting a feasibility budget, they say, here's a bunch of people to talk to. So it really depends, right? Because they don't know, right? I mean, there's the scope, as Jim just said, districts and cities and towns come into this process ranging from we know exactly what we want to we have no idea, it's just Houston, we have a problem. So we currently, as we keep talking about, we have roughly 1.7 million in feasibility. In speaking with, again, I keep going to Doran Whittier and Habib and Associates, two groups we've worked with, that's reasonable. I mean, their budgets ranging from $1.5 million to $2.5 million. To 8, right? And so I think certainly one thing is clear, the more we study, the more that's time and money, right? So if we can, back to the visioning discussion, if we can have some discussions that lead us towards a decision about grade 6, yes or no, a combined campus, yes or no, along with that overall vision of what we want and hope for our educational program, I think it will help us save money in the long run. So I don't know, Jim, if you have any thoughts on, again, we're setting a budget. Ultimately, we know that the MSBA will pay 47.5% of whatever the costs are. The school committee needs to vote to appropriate the entire amount. And so there's a question in working with our district treasurer, an interim business manager or director of finance, and our future, who's already involved in things, trying to figure out, can you vote a higher number than that's already sitting in stabilization? So could we say 2 million, or can we really only say 1.7 million, because that's what exists today? So we have to figure that all out, but I would love to hear from you, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, the feasibility and schematic, I always combine them, because what you have to do at the end of schematic is fill out a 3011, and that is your budget, period. You can't go back, tell them, and it went up. So to your point, you have to be realistic, but make sure you have enough contingency that you have a little bit of movement as people that have been involved in doing this. Schematic design, there's a long way to go, and you would know from being in the building industry yourself, there's a long way to go, and things change, things evolve, prices go up in many occasions, so you want to make sure that the number that you put on that 3011, which is what the PFA, project funding agreement, is based on, and then what the reimbursement is based on, that number as well. You got to make sure that number on that 3011 is solid, and you do have to be conservative. It might seem high, but you're going to be better off down the road.
So what would you So for a total feasibility and schematic budget is 1.7,
Well, the 3011, you also have to include your construction budget, so
Yeah.
I was sort of, in my head,
yeah.
fast forwarding.
Right, so to your point, through feasibility and schematic, that's what this first funding is for that project team. So for an OPM, and we haven't gotten into whether we're doing sealed bid or it's called construction management at risk, which I think this is a good CM at risk candidate. That involves when the construction manager, the contractor is involved. But it's really the funding for that first developing the study in that first schematic design.
Yeah, I would encourage people to go to the MSBA website. I printed them out here, but they're so small. If I pass them around, I don't know if you could read them, because I could barely read them myself with glasses. But if you go to the MSBA website and you look at Building with Us, and you scroll down there, it takes a little work, but you can look at all the OPM and designer fees by phase and by percentage of construction cost, and it'll give you a range of how it shook out during each phase: feasibility, schematic, DD, CD, and then CA, construction, and then the OPM. And it's very helpful. I think if everyone in the room, I can put something together myself and pass it out. I can just create a spreadsheet. We probably have it anyway. You guys could look at it rather than have to go through this measles chart that's crazy on that website.
You're talking about the data from 14 on?
Yeah, so you probably pulled it up, or you've looked at it before.
And they're all over the place. But
They are.
The average is 0.68 of the project cost.
I mean, the OPMs are anywhere from 2 to, I've seen some at 5% of the cost of construction. Just depends on who it is, scope of the job, the duration. Duration is really a thing that drives the OPM fee, just because it's time.
Yeah, so this first vote is funding all of the work to get to that number, right? So it's the study and then the development of that schematic budget and schematic design rather, that goes on, what you call a 3011?
Yeah.
And that is what then becomes the document that in Module 5, not the document, but the number and the design that we bring to the voters. So not a decision we have to have tonight, but just to put that on the radar by the time on that deliverables, that's the big vote of the school committee, is determining what that total budget will be. So we'll do some more work on that and come back with a recommendation. I don't know if that requires a building committee recommendation. Probably not a bad thing to have on the books when we come back and get that clarified.
Okay.
Unless people have thoughts, do you have?
I have a number, but I'll leave it in my head.
Throw out a number. Let's have a discussion.
1.7.
I mean, that's.
Not because that's wasn't, I can tell you where I came up with that, but I will throw out more numbers that you may not want to hear. But I think that's pretty conservative. Hopefully it's less than that.
Okay.
But.
Yeah, and I think, again, need to confirm this, I don't know that we can vote more than that because that is what roughly the balance is now. And I would imagine an auditor would say you can't vote money that you don't have right now. So it doesn't mean, right, and I think to your point, it doesn't mean we're spending all of that. And if we spent 1.7, we write checks for 1.7 million, we're getting 47.5% of that back. So the second part of this discussion that the school committee has been talking about for a few years now is, oh no, that is all the balance we have to deal with a leaky roof, and it's a $50,000 solution. I mean, that's been kind of the scope of the repairs have been 50 here and 75. So that is our only rainy day fund. And so making sure we have the mechanics, is the right word? The structure in place to be able to still have those funds available in what is a 5, 6, 7 year process. So I don't think 1.7 is a bad number, and we can certainly go with that and kind of keep vetting that further.
Yeah,
that's really.
I'm just looking at these, and I agree with you. It's conservative. I think that's plenty of money. I can pass this around. If you look on the top, you'll see the designer feasibility costs and then the OPM feasibility. It's well below $1.7 million for feasibility
Here,
stage.
Brian's got old eyes. You want?
Oh, there you go. So you were already down the
This
road
is just
on
not a nice crowd tonight.
Oh, my mic was on, sorry.
Oh, I like
there
Matt's
you go.
page. Awesome.
Brian, do you recall what Pine Grove School's feasibility, granted, it was a much smaller scale of a project, right? I can't remember.
I can tell you.
Oh, thank you.
I believe it was 700.
Did you say 700? Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like the number.
515, 690.
915?
515.
550, okay, yeah. I was going to
say
say,
this back.
Actual, right, but we voted, I believe we voted 7.
yeah, I think the number was around 7, and it came in lower, and same thing with the design, under budget.
Let's not
I'm
use
not
that
saying that, Mike.
We
But
like
it
under
happens.
budget.
Not promise, a vision.
Listen to everything he says.
Okay, so that's good to hear Jim say, in his experience too, he feels like that's a reasonable number. So so that you're all aware, we're going to work towards that being our number. And I would say, as we continue to have a discussion with the committee, as we figure out that balance, is it between 1.5 and 1.7? And we'll bring that back to this group. Sorry, he's the chair.
So, Jim, nice to meet you. You'll get to know me. You might hate me for a little bit, but then you'll come back and like me. The 1.7, do you think that's enough money to get this done?
feasibility and schematic, yeah. If you look at these numbers that confirm that, but that's a lot of money for that component of the.
I'm just asking it, okay, I'll ask the school committee and everyone else, because the 3 selectmen, we know the issue. Brian knows the issue. It's not going to go over that, and you'd be coming to the town, right?
It can't, structurally it can't. So when we vote, so, this group and then the committee votes that budget, that goes into the feasibility funding agreement. That is that last thing due on October 31st, and that is all the MSBA is going to pay. So could we, if we had more money, I suppose the school committee could vote and use more out of stabilization, but not a dime more is coming from the MSBA. As Jim was saying, that 3011, which is what documents the full project cost, you don't have a chance to go back and say, well, can we have a little more?
Yeah.
You play with what's reimbursable and non-reimbursable throughout the whole process, but that project, similar to that feasibility study agreement is it. It's the number.
As you guys all know, the budgets are very extremely tight in the towns, and
Typically, the OPMs are pretty low. I'll just say, we're pretty low on the feasibility schematic, trying to facilitate the project to go forward. That's how we looked at our job as the OPM, so.
okay. No, if there's any inkling that you guys are going to need more, or we're going to need more money from the towns, it's going to be extremely hard. I just want that to be aware to everyone.
There's no sundown on that money, the 1.7?
For structurally for the school
Yeah,
committee?
yeah.
For the district, no. So that is in stabilization as it exists now. So if it took longer or quicker, it's accessible.
It's not technically ESSER because
Oh, is that what you mean? Because, it was offset with other spending that was ESSER eligible, that shorted other spending, that then basically reverted into excess. So that is in district stabilization, able to be appropriated by the school committee. It's just the structure of the stabilization. So, yes, no other votes but the 9-member school committee. And I not to speak for the committee, Mike, but I don't think there's any school committee member that would say we're going anywhere past whatever that number is, because we have said over and over and over and over again, we're coming to the towns for a vote for the project, but not before.
No, I understand that. I just, there's cameras on us, Brian. There's people watching us, and a lot of people are nervous in our 3 towns, so I just want them to be aware.
The consultants are also selected based on merit, and then you have to negotiate, especially the OPM, you have to negotiate a fee that is amenable to both parties.
my other question is, as I asked Matt, and I know I've asked Narissa, drawing this down where it hurt our credit borrowing capabilities, because I know that's one of the factors, is having a high number at 1.7 helps us as a school. Drawing that down, is that going to be a negative when we do go to, bond out the money or something?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that has been part of the policy that the committee set, and we talked about this with the current budget, is that the budget was increased by $75,000 per year, fiscal '24 and '5 to go into stabilization, '26 and '27 to go into OPEB. In talking with our bond advisors, the most important thing is not drawing down E&D, which is our true reserve, and not going against our policy. I know we talked about that at Finance Committee. I guess it was just Narissa there the other day, last week. In that the committee has set that policy, and so we need to adhere to it. Or people are, the advisor or the rating agencies are looking and saying, well, you plan this, but you're not. Stabilization, of course, anytime you spend reserves, it's not a positive, but stabilization is designed for offsetting, so last year we ended up borrowing out of stabilization because we had huge roof repairs and all of that. So that doesn't necessarily hit, again, we haven't been re-rated, but that doesn't hit because that is the design of that fund, is to have money set aside so we don't have to hit other funds and make cuts in the general operation to fund extraordinary repairs. So by design, no, that won't. It's more important that we keep adding to it long-term. Yeah.
Okay, I just want everyone to know.
Great question. Yeah.
There's a little bit more than that in there, isn't there?
Stabilization?
Yeah. Or is it 1.7, 17,944? Is that what the total is, roughly?
Is it, are you looking at finance?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it is right now.
So we would be drawing it down all the way, all right.
So,
but we'd be
interest
getting
is good right now.
Yeah, we'd be getting reimbursed as well.
Right, so it's just so everyone's aware, not this is the mechanics that you likely wouldn't have to be involved in, but the state system is called ProPay. So it used to be in a land long ago. So when I started in this job in 2005, this project was done under the SBAB. And as I started in 2005, they were still auditing the project that ended in 2000. So the auditor's office took over the MSBA, and now the treasurer's office, I'm sorry, not the auditor's office. And so now all reimbursements are done within 30 days. So it used to be we bonded for the project and borrowed, and then the state gave back our percentage, so they were giving back both principal and interest. Now we pay a bill for $1 million, and our reimbursement is 50%. We pay the $1 million within 30 days. We get the $500,000 from the state. So real time, that's what allows us to say, yes, we're going to spend 1.7, but every dollar we spend, we're getting 47 cents back right away for the what ifs, for the, oh my gosh, yes, we're moving towards, but the gym is leaking again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mention the gym, John. Sore subject.
Okay. Sorry, I went on the other agenda. I think that's it, right?
I guess maybe a question is there a night of the week that works best? I mean, I think in general, 7 o'clock meetings make sense, 6:30?
6:30.
6:30?
5.
Do 5?
Do
I
that
hear
too.
3? Is 3? So is 6:30, is that doable for people coming from work to get here for 6:30? So for the future, what'd you say? So for the future, 6:30, is there a night of the week that works well?
Tuesday works for me.
Well, Tuesday nights, twice a month, we have our board meetings.
Okay.
Tuesday isn't great for me.
Tuesdays, is today Tuesday? Today's a Tuesday. Yeah, so we'll stick, and I was going to say some boards. Wednesdays are school committees, Mondays are some select boards. So are Thursdays good?
Stay away from the DCC.
Friday Eve, River's a fan, yeah? So your only uncommitted night?
Thursdays are DCC, we just have to plan it around that.
So I was going to say that's, once a month, so we can plan off those. So we'll target 6:30 on Thursdays. that make sense?
Are we looking at once a month?
Once the project, yes, once we are done, I guess my question is, I don't want to gather the group to meet if there isn't a need. And so, or I mean, Matt doesn't want to gather the group. This is your fault now. So right up until we complete Module 1, there's a lot of work on our end to get information in. Once we know there's a board meeting and we're welcomed in and we're doing designer selection, that then kicks off a lot of work. And then with the OPM sitting at the table and a designer, it's going to be, yes, every month. Is that fair? I mean, it could be more frequent, 3 weeks, so somewhere between 3 and 5 weeks. I think it probably for everyone, it's easiest to say we're going to meet I mean, we can make it up, but it's the third Thursday of the month we're on. And then this group will remain, again, it's high-level decisions, bringing big decisions back, presenting, making decisions, and then a lot of other work that's happening away from the table.
Let's ask a question. Once you bring the OPM and designer on, it's helpful if you have a working group that works with the OPM and designer to make decisions, then they could bring them to this committee if that has to be involved. Because not everybody here, I would imagine, can be involved in all those meetings. So.
Typically, isn't that like the building principals are going to be involved in quite a few meetings? I'm speaking from experience, so have fun.
Take a breath.
Every Friday afternoon in the trailer.
Yeah, so I will say, right, obviously Jim has done this on the OPM side. Rich is currently coming from Haverhill, where he's a principal in the Cosentino Middle School. And so they are 4 years in, a year away from move-in.
Yeah.
So
six years so far.
So real life experience on that side. So yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And I think it really is more kind of the principals and us kind of the day-to-day working with the chair and vice chair and saying, okay, this is what we're bringing to the table for the OPM. And then all of you get to have a say and an opinion and have those discussions.
So what's the next deliverable you need from this committee?
I need to confirm, I don't believe any of these things, perhaps the feasibility study agreement, but I don't even believe that, because all of this is a requirement of the school committee to establish everything, and then heretofore, once the building committee is established, then everything is a vote of this committee to recommend to the school committee, and then obviously funding at town meeting. So I don't believe there's a need to meet. I can certainly keep this group updated, right? I mean, the takeaways are, we need to confirm that feasibility budget that will ultimately lead, and going to do some work to talk about that first video and what that would look like, as well as that visioning. And I will keep this group updated on what that process would be. And if it's something we can kick off, maybe the small group that starts to do some building visits this spring, and then some work over the summer and into the fall, so that by the time we're choosing a designer and an OPM, hopefully as early as the holidays of this year, that we're ready to go. So I will be in touch and pull dates, but we'll target Thursdays at 6:30.
I would add, if we're going to have small working groups, make sure all the information is conveyed to the whole board. And if decisions are being made without the whole board, there's got to be, some discussion on that. Because I don't want, some people going rogue and making decisions for this whole board. We all have a say.
Absolutely. So that small working group would be making sure we're bringing the decisions to this board, right? Things that just have to, as Rich has said, the amount of hours he's spent in that trailer and meeting and doing all of this. And you remember, Chris, right? It's making sure that any decisions do come to this board. It's not making decisions outside of, it's making sure that the decisions are happening with the OPM, and the OPM is keeping the designer and the construction manager honest. And then when there's a decision needed, it's coming back to this group, not offline.
I agree, just because this committee has to build trust with the three communities, and we have to know the answers. So if someone comes up to us publicly and asks us a question, that a decision was already made and we can't answer it, they're not going to trust us. So we got to make sure we all have the information, no matter what.
I don't want to speak for Matt as the chair, but I can tell you there will never be a decision made that this group is not part of and aware of.
Oh, no, I trust, I just wanted to get out there because, some people are new at this, so I want to make sure.
And nobody will be going rogue. That will not be happening.
We hope.
All right, anything else?
No other questions? Good process?
Make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.